Well, good afternoon. This is Dawn Slike representing Christian Neck Scarves. It is Tuesday, February 13th, 2024, and this tutorial will be from the very beginning of a little girl's pink scarf. It will be a toddler scarf, and we're going to be using Walmart's Mainstays 100% acrylic yarn, which is super soft, and it's simply called Pink. It's a nice rich pink, almost in the fuchsia range, but not quite. It's a nice rich pink. I just like the yarn because it's really inexpensive and it's really soft, and it'll be perfect on a toddler's neck. So my toddler scarves are about 3 feet long. We'll be doing a 26 stitch pattern, and we're going to kick it off. I'm using a size 10 knitting needle with this yarn, which will keep it fluid, and hopefully I'll be able to show you how to get one of these started. We're going to start with double ribbing, but first we have to cast on 26 stitches. So I'm going to throw the skein on the floor and get started. I need about maybe this much yarn to get 26 stitches cast on. That might be too long, but it's okay. So the first stitch is actually 2 stitches. The way I cast on was taught to me by a professional knitter at a YMCA back in Erie, Pennsylvania, when I was about 10 or 11. No, I guess I was 12 years old, maybe 13, when I was shown the correct way to cast on. So I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. I haven't yet decided whether I'm going to put fringe on this scarf, but I know I will be starting with double ribbing. So with double ribbing on a 26 stitch pattern means that I'll be starting with 2 knit stitches and ending with 2 knit stitches, so that it looks nice and uniform on the front of the scarf. This is the odd number row, so we're going to knit 2, 1, 2, the first row is always the slowest, purl 2, try to get my tension even without it being too tight, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, it's funny, I just started this video, knit 2, and the furnace came on right away, right behind the camera, so we're going to get background noise going on with my clock dinging every 15 minutes and my furnace coming on at the same time. I apologize for that. I'm working in my living room. Knit 2, purl 2, This is pleasantly soft yarn, and it's very affordable. That's a 7-ounce skein of yarn, and we're only using a small fraction of that yarn to make a toddler scarf. I think I could probably get 3 toddler scarves out of that skein of yarn. Not positive about that, but we'll see. Okay, now we're at the last stitch, and this is where on previous tutorials I showed you we're going to bring the yarn forward. Instead of knit the last stitch, we're going to slip it onto the needle so that we have these beautiful lacy loopy edges that make the scarf look finished on the sides. So I've done that. So we've done the first row, and now we're going to do the back, which is the even number rows are the purl side, the back side. And instead of starting the row with a, well, we have to knit that first stitch so that we can complete that loop, and then we purl the next stitch because the first 2 stitches technically are purls, and then we knit 2. See, we're doing the opposite of the front side. So if it's a purl on the back, we purl those, and if it's a knit on the back, we knit those. We're making a rib. This is a double rib stitch, and we're going to do this for 6 rows. Knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, knit, knit, purl, purl, and we flip it over. And now I did what I said I was going to do. I'm slipping that, bringing the yarn forward and just dropping it, and then slipping that last stitch onto the needle so that we can make that pretty loopy edge beginning on the next stitch. So we're knitting that stitch this way, making sure we grab the right yarn and not the tail. There's our first knit and our second knit. This is going to be tedious because we're going to be double ribbing for the next few minutes until we get 6 rows of double ribbing in. Purl, purl. I love ribbing. It's pretty, it's neat, it makes a nice finish, beginning and end of a scarf. And I don't have to change needle sizes. We're going to stay on the size 10 needles to make this scarf. This is very pleasant yarn to work with. Whoops, I almost purled a knit stitch. It's 2 purls, 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits, 2 purls. Now, it's fun to make toddler scarves because they whip up really fast. It takes about 5 to 6 hours to make a toddler scarf as opposed to 9 to 12 hours to make an adult scarf, depending, and sometimes much longer depending on how large you want your scarf to be. Toddler scarves, they work up really fast. Now we're on the back side. Purl. knit, knit. This is the 4th row of 6 of these double ribbing rows. I purchased this yarn in bulk. When you buy things in bulk purchases, often enough they will discount per skein the cost of the yarn. And I think I got a really good price on this. There's nothing fancy about the colors, they're just perfect for little children. I have a bunch of different colors in the Mainstays acrylic yarn. And again, it's very affordable and it's wonderfully soft. For an inexpensive yarn, I'm very pleased with the texture, and it feels good in my fingers. It's not scritchy at all, it's very soft. So we have 4 of 6 rows done. We're going to do 2 more rows and then we'll start the pattern. Knit, knit. Purl 2. We make our toddler scarves 3 feet long so that about an 18-month-old can start wearing a scarf after they learn to walk. We want them to cover their necks up, but we don't want it too bulky, we don't want it too wide, we don't want it terribly long, because 18-month-old babies are pretty small. So we think if you make it 3 feet long, that'll get them to kindergarten. And then you can give them a 4-foot long scarf, which will get them to maybe 3rd or 4th grade, or 5th, depending on how large they get, the children. And then we move them into the tween scarves, which are about 5 feet long. But they're still narrow. We use certain yarns to keep them narrow, and certain size needles to keep them narrow, because they're still growing children even as they enter preteens. And so we pick our colors accordingly to, this is the last row, 6 of 6, according to the age of the child, the colors we think the children will like at that age. We have wonderful variegateds that we use for children, but we also like to use these soft pastels for the little girls and little boy colors. I like to do camos for little boys. I like to do stripes for both boys and girls, depending on what I have available. The sky's really the limit on how you make a child's scarf. And we encourage people when they stop at our craft tables to let the children pick out the scarf colors they like. And then they'll wear it. If they get to choose their own scarf when they're shopping, they'll want to wear it. And that's the whole idea. Okay, I'm finishing up the 6th row of 6 double ribbing. I think I brought the camera in a little bit closer than in previous videos. I really want you to see what I'm doing. I think this is a wonderful way to start a scarf. It looks finished and polished. Now we're going to move into the pattern. Now this is the fun part. And you have to count as you go along so you don't get lost. So the first stitch, you're knitting your loop. Then the next stitch, you're purling. This is a 26 stitch pattern, so we consistently do it the same way. We knit the next 6 because that's going to be our braided cable panel. 3, 4, 5, 6. But on the first row of this pattern, we don't actually start cabling yet. We wait until row 3 to begin cabling. So that's just 6 knit stitches on this row. Then we purl 1. Then we knit 8 because that's our cross panel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now here we don't start the cross this early. We have a panel of stockinette stitches beginning that panel, and then we start the cross. I haven't yet decided how many stockinette rows I want to do. It's probably going to be 8 or 10. So I just knitted 8 for the cross panel. Now we're going to purl 1 again. Now we're going to do the second braided cable panel, which is kicked off with 6 knit stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're purling 1, and then we're slipping that last stitch with the yarn in front to make that loopy edge. I love this pretty loopy edge. I'm so glad Chrissy taught us how to do this. These scarves look so polished and so perfect now because the edges are pretty, the ends are pretty. We've tweaked this pattern over the years and now we have wonderfully perfect scarves. Okay, this is row 2. So this is the back side. We're going to make our loop. Now, when we purled it on the front, we're going to purl it on the back as well, this next stitch, because this is going to be our seed column. It's just one single row, one single seed column. So we're purling that stitch all the time, front and back. Now we're going to go to the next 6 stitches, which were knitted on the front, so they will be purled on the back because this is our 6 stitches we're going to be using for the braided cable. 1, 2, purl 3, purl 4, purl 5, purl 6. And now the next stitch is a single column of seeds again, so we're going to purl that stitch. Now this is the beauty of a 26 stitch pattern. The back side, much of it is just purling straight across until you get to the very last stitch. It's so easy. It whips up really fast. This is the stockinette part of the scarf in the middle. When we're not working on a cross, we're just purling across. This is row 2. Let's say we're going to do 8 rows of stockinette. We might go 10, but let's just call it 8 for now. So we're just purling along on the back on the even number rows where there's no cross already started. We just purl across because we don't have to worry about alternating knits and purls for a seed pattern when we're just purling that one solitary stitch every row. So on the back, it's just purl across. It's so wonderful to be able to do this without paying a whole lot of attention to what you're doing. So that was row 2 of 8. Now we're starting row 3 of 8. This is the row we're going to begin braided cable. We made our loop on the end. We're purling the next stitch because that's a solitary seed stitch. Now, this is where we begin our braided cable. I have my braided cable, my cabling needle right here. We're going to slip it in the first 2 stitches, drop it in the front, knit the next 2 stitches, knit the 2 stitches that were on the cabling needle, and knit the last 2 stitches of this cable. Now we purl the next stitch, because that's a seed stitch. We always purl that, front and back. And now we're in the 8-stitch panel where the crosses are going to go. So we're just doing stockinette right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We purl the next stitch because that's a seed stitch. Now we're going into the second braided cable. Cabling needle, we're going to slip the short end of that cabling needle through the first 2 stitches, drop it in the front, knit the next 2 stitches, bring the cabling needle up, knit those 2 stitches, I sure hope the camera's picking this all up, and then the last 2 stitches of the cable are just knitted. And then we have a purl stitch, which is another column of seed, and we slip that last stitch onto the needle with the yarn in front. Okay, that was row 3 of 8. Now we're on row 4. We're going to make our loop. Purl all the way across. You don't even need to count. You're just purling across. You don't need to change a thing because we're in the stockinette section of the cross panel. So anytime you have stockinette sections between the crosses or before and after the crosses, you're just purling the even number rows. It's so easy to make a toddler scarf. 26 stitches is the lowest number of stitches we use in order to get all of the 3 elements into a scarf. You have braided cables, you have crosses, and you have seed stitches. And 26 stitches is the minimum number of stitches in order to make this a pretty and uniform and consistent scarf where all 3 elements of our Christian neck scarves are incorporated into our scarf. We do make adult scarves with only 26 stitches, but usually it's because we double stranded, we made it a little wider, we used a slightly larger needle, and 26 stitches works for that type of an adult scarf as well. Okay, that was the 4th row. Now we're going to do the part 2 of the braided cable on this row, and we're still doing stockinette in the middle where the crosses are going to go. So we make our loop by knitting this way, and then we purl the next stitch. Now on the second half of the braided cable, we're knitting the first 2 stitches. Then the second 2 stitches are the ones that go on the cabling needle, and they're being put on the needle and then dropped behind. And then you knit the last 2 stitches, and then from behind you bring up your cabling needle and knit those 2 stitches. Then we purl the next stitch, knit the next 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. time to pull out more yarn. We purl the next stitch because that's a seed. Now we're at the other braided cable and we do the same thing. We knit the first two. We pick up the next two stitches on the cabling needle and drop it behind. We knit the last two stitches, stitches 5 and 6, and then we bring up the cabling needle stitches, knit those two stitches, bring the yarn forward so we can purl the seed stitch, and then we slip the last stitch as always. That was row 5. Now you can see the effect of the cables. One's in front, one's in back. So this is row 6 of the stockinette. And this is straight purl across again. I love this element of making a toddler scarf. It's so easy to do the scarf when you only have a 26 stitch pattern because your seed stitches are only a single column. That makes the backside super easy to purl across in the stockinette areas of the scarf. Just purling across. No adjustments, no counting. And I love this yarn. It's so soft, it's so sweet. It's such a sweet shade of pink. I'm going to love making this scarf. And I'm going to love making it quickly. And I'm already thinking I'm not going to bother putting fringe on it because I really love the double ribbing on the end. Okay, that was 6 of 8, and I think I have to measure. I'm going to be using my ruler to see how many inches that is so far, because I need to make about 3.5 inches per cross times 10. We make our children's crosses only 10 rows instead of 12 so that they're smaller crosses, and because we're making a 36-inch scarf, thereabouts, it's never precise but it's close, we want to calculate how much stockinette we're going to use to kick it off and how much to use between our crosses in order to achieve the number of inches we need per cross. So I'm moving into the 7th row of this pattern. We still haven't started making crosses, but we will be soon. This is row 7. So we make our loop, we purl. We're going to do part 1 of the braided cable again, picking up the first 2 stitches, dropping them in front, knitting the next 2 stitches, picking up the cabling needle, picking up those 2 stitches and knitting them, and then knitting stitches 5 and 6, purl the next stitch. We're still doing stockinette in the cross panel, so this is row 7 of the stockinette, and we need to knit 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, purl 1, and now we're at the 2nd braided cable. We'll use our cabling needle to pick up the first 2 stitches and drop it in the front, knit the next 2 stitches, stitches 3 and 4, pick up the cabling needle stitches and knit those 2 stitches, and then knit stitches 5 and 6. Purl 1, slip 1. That was row 7 of the stockinette. This is row 8, and again, we're still on stockinette. So after we make this loop, we're purling across without having to count anything. Once we start making crosses, then we're going to have to start counting. So this is row 8. I have to measure this. I didn't change needle sizes, so I can measure, including my double ribbing, to be able to calculate how many rows I need for what. Basically do this every time I make a scarf with a new yarn. I haven't really made a toddler scarf before with this mainstays yarn, and I'm just making sure I don't make something entirely too short or entirely too long. I want it as close to 36 inches long as possible so I can sell it as a toddler scarf. Okay, I love how this looks, and it's so soft. It's unbelievably soft. I love this yarn. I love this yarn. Okay, I'm going to get my ruler and see where we're at inches wise. Oh my. Okay, so I have almost 3 inches in 14 rows. So I'm thinking 3.5 inches is 18 rows. 18 rows is 3.5 inches. So let me think about this a minute. Need 10 rows to make a cross, and that would be 18. That's 3.5. Oh, this is perfect. So I'm thinking my 36-inch scarf is probably going to be more like 37-inch scarf. If I stick to 8 rows stockinette and then do a 10-row cross and just keep that going all the way to the end and then end with this, it won't be much over 36 inches. It'll probably be 38. And I won't be reversing crosses. We don't reverse the crosses on the children's scarves. We just keep them going, and we only do 10 to represent the 10 commandments. And we use 10-row crosses to make our children's scarves. So I'm going to stop the 8 rows of stockinette and begin the cross on the 9th row here. This is perfect. Very happy. Okay, we're going to start row 9. This is where we begin making crosses. So we're knitting our first loop, purling, and then the beginning of the cable. This is part 2 of the braided cable. So we are taking the 3rd and 4th stitches, putting them on the cabling needle, dropping it behind, knitting stitches 5 and 6, picking up the cabling needle, knitting those 2 stitches, And that cable part 2 is finished. Purl the next stitch for the seed. Now, this is where we begin counting. We're going to start making crosses. We're knitting 3. 1, 2, 3. We're purling 2. 1, 2. We're knitting 3. 1, 2, 3. And now we're at the seed stitch. Purl. And now we're going to make our second braided cable. Knit the first 2. Slip the next 2 onto the cabling needle and drop it behind. Knit the next 2, stitches 5 and 6. And then knit the 2 stitches that are on the cabling needle from behind. And now we're going to purl our seed and slip the next stitch with the yarn in front. Here we go. Okay, now we're on row 10. Knit the loop, purl the seed. Now, this is where we begin counting. 1, 2, these are all purls, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're purling the seed, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now, I counted 10 after I did the seed at the edge. 10. Now we're looking at those 2 knit stitches that were the beginning of the cross, and we're going to knit those. We're on the back, but we're going to knit those. Knit 2, and now we're going to purl out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we're purling that seed stitch, which is actually 11, and then we're slipping that last loop. And now we've flipped it over to the front again, and you can see the beginning of the cross. These are the first 2 of 6 rows of the bottom of the cross. We're not doing 8 rows like we do on an adult scarf. We're only doing 6 rows. To make the crosses only a 10-row pattern. The crosses are smaller because the children are small, because the scarf is small. We're keeping them childlike. So we're starting row 3 of 6 before we do the cross beam. So we're going to do the loop on the end, knit, purl the seed, do part 1 of the braided cable. We're slipping those 2 stitches, dropping them in front, knitting the next 2 stitches, bringing the cable needle up and knitting those 2 stitches in the front. Yes, I have trouble holding on to 3 needles, especially if the yarn wants to slip off the needle, and that's happened enough times. And knit the last 2 stitches of the cable, purl the next stitch, which is a seed. Now here we are again at the cross panel, so we're knitting 3, pull out some more yarn. 1, 2, 3, purl 2, 1, 2, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, purl a seed, slip the next 2 cable stitches onto the cabling needle, drop it in front, knit the next 2, knit the cable 2, knit the last 2, stitches 5 and 6, purl the seed, slip the last stitch. I'm really loving this yarn. It'll be fluid and warm at the same time. It'll be perfect for some happy little pink loving girl. Row 4. Knit the loop, purl the seed, purl the back of the cable, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, purl the seed, 7, purl the beginning of the cross panel, 8, 9, and 10, knit the cross. This is the back side, so we knit the cross on the back, knit 2, and then purl out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, of course 11 is the seed, 11, and slip. It's getting a little tangly. Okay, starting to shape up very nice. So we have 4 rows of the bottom 6 of the cross. We have 2 more rows to go before we do the cross beam. So we're going to knit the loop. We are now on row 5 of the cross. Purl the seed, knit the first 2 stitches of the cable. This is part 2 of the cable, part 2 of the braided cable. Pick up the next 2 stitches on the cabling needle and drop it behind. Knit the last 2 stitches. Pick up the cabling needle, knit those 2 stitches, purl the seed, knit the first 3 stitches of the cross panel, 1, 2, 3, purl the cross. We're on the front, so we're purling the cross, purl 2, knit 3 to finish the cross panel, purl the seed. Now we're back at the other cable, knit 2, slip the next 2 stitches onto the cabling needle and drop them behind. Knit stitches 5 and 6 of the braided cable. Knit the 2 stitches off the cabling needle. Purl the seed and slip. In case anybody's wondering what's going on with my cabling needle, after I take it out of my knitting, I slip it down into my collar of my shirt. So it's handy. Doesn't hurt. Perfectly handy. Very handy. Okay, now we're on the back. This is row 6 of 6 of the bottom of the cross. So, here we go again. We're knitting the loop, we're purling 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now we didn't change anything, I just started counting at the seed stitch. So instead of 10, it's 11. You're just purling 11 across. Then you get to the cross, you're knitting on the back, so you're knitting the next 2 stitches. 1, 2, and then you're purling 11 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then you slip. Okay, we have gotten this far. We have completed the bottom of the children's cross, which is 6 rows of purl on the front. So this is the row that we begin the cross beam, and that's where the counting changes. So let's get this started. We'll knit the loop, we'll purl the seed. We're at part 1 of the cable, so we will slip the first 2 stitches onto the cabling needle, knit the next 2, bring the needle up, knit those 2, and knit stitches 5 and 6. That completes part 1 of the braided cable. Purl the next stitch. Now we are at the cross beam row. So instead of knitting 3 here, we're only knitting 1. And then we begin the cross beam, which is 6 stitches of purl. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we knit 1 again to complete the cross panel. We purl the seed stitch, and then we start the other braided cable. Pick up the first 2 stitches on the cabling needle, drop it in front, knit the next 2 stitches, bring up the cabling needle, knit those 2 stitches, knit the last 2 stitches, stitches 5 and 6, purl the seed, and slip the last stitch with the yarn in the front, as always. It's coming out very nice. I'm very pleased with this yarn. It's going to be a favorite of mine. Okay, we're going to knit the loop, purl the seed, and instead of purling 11, we're going to be purling, I think, 9. Let's count this. 1, we already did 1. 1, this is purl 2, purl 3, purl 4, purl 5, purl 6, purl 7, purl 8, and purl 9. Yes, ma'am. We have the back of the cross beam, so instead of purling 6 across, we're knitting 6 across because we're on the back side of the scarf. 1, 2, knit 2, knit 3, knit 4, knit 5, knit 6, purl 1, and this should be purl 9. Purl 2, purl 3, purl 4, purl 5, purl 6, purl 7, purl 8, and purl 9, and slip the last stitch. Excellent. Excellent. Now we're at the top of the cross. We have 2 more rows to complete this cross. Purl stitches on the front. So, we're back to knitting the first stitch, the loop, purling the seed, doing part 2 of the cable, 1, 2, pick up the next 2 stitches on the cabling needle and dropping it behind, knit the next 2, knit the 2 stitches from the cabling needle, I don't know what the camera's capturing. I'm sorry if this gets out of focus. Purl the seed. Now we're back to knitting 3 before we get to the top of the cross. 1, 2, 3. Purl 2, just like the bottom of the cross. Knit 3. Purl a seed, start the next cable, knit 2, do part 2 of the cable of the braid, so you're slipping the next 2 stitches on the cabling needle, dropping it behind, knit the last 2 stitches, 5 and 6, and then bring up your cabling needle and knit the 2 stitches that were on the cabling needle. And that completes part 2 of the braided cable. Bring the yarn forward so you can purl your seed stitch and then slip the last stitch. And now we're coming to row 10, the final row of the child's cross. We're going to knit the loop. We're on row 10. Purl the seed. And this should be 11 again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, knit 2, and then you purl out 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and you slip the last stitch. Now we have completed the cross. We started this scarf with 6 rows of double ribbing. Then we began 8 rows of stockinette, and we began making braided cables and seeds. We did 8 rows of stockinette before we began our 10-row cross. From this point, we're going to repeat from here to there 9 more times. 9 more times. So we have 10 crosses, and we're going to be finishing this with 8 rows of stockinette after the 10th cross, 8 rows of stockinette and then 6 rows of double ribbing, and then we will finish it off. And that will be about a 38-inch scarf, I think, God willing. I'm pretty sure that's how it's going to calculate out. So I'm going to stop here. This next row will be 8 stitches of stockinette instead of any cross, because the cross is finished, and then we'll have 8 rows of 8 stitches. So the back will be straight across purl again. Such an easy pattern on the back side. In the areas where we're doing stockinette, we don't have to count any stitches when we do the even number rows on the back side. We just purl across. It's such an easy pattern. And these really fly because we're not complicating things by having to count stitches on the stockinette areas. Half of this scarf, almost half of this scarf, is flying through the back side. It really speeds things up, yet you have an absolutely gorgeous little scarf. So I'm hoping you understood what I told you on this video. I'm going to repeat what I'm doing here. We started with 6 rows of double ribbing, then we did 8 rows of stockinette before we started making crosses. At the same time, we began our cables and our seed stitches, which happen in 4 places. There's a seed stitch here, a seed stitch here, a seed stitch here, and a seed stitch just before the loops on the ends. And then the crosses, because this is a child's scarf, this is a toddler scarf, these crosses are only 10 rows instead of 12. And this is going to be a little over 3 feet long for a toddler girl. And then we're going to repeat these 18 rows 9 more times, and then finish with 8 rows of stockinette and end with 6 rows of double ribbing, and then cast it off. And then of course we'll weave in our tails on the back side of the scarf so they're hidden, and then we'll have an absolutely beautiful little girl scarf. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Hopefully you'll be able to understand everything I did on this video, and I hope this has been helpful to you, and I hope it inspires you to want to make toddler scarves, which really could be done in an afternoon or evening if you wanted to get aggressive. I think this is going to take me about 5.5 hours to make. I'm up to the challenge. I know my pattern really well. I don't have to pay a lot of attention to what I'm doing. Made hundreds of these scarves. So thank you again for watching. This is Dawn Slyke signing out, representing Christian Neck Scarves. Have a good evening. Thank you for watching.